We are live.
And we're live.
That's crazy. I mean, once again, internet, just live. Actually, now I need to change screens because I said, let me put you so I'm looking right at you, not like looking to the side of you. It's a very weird look. Since me, my two monitor setup is so me. So, good evening, and some people good early evening. I am Lewis Porter Jr., and I'm here for a lovely episode of Transparency Agenda. And our special guest today is...
Hi, I'm Owen Casey Stevens.
So let's ask all the important questions.
Transparency Agenda, though, right? So that's the same thing.
Yeah, well, Okay, important questions. Number one, Owen, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because God knows we've never heard of you before.
Well, I'm sure there are people watching eventually who've never heard of me. So I'm a game designer and a game developer. I am currently a developer and a member of the Starfinder team for Paizo. And so that's my full-time gig, my day job. That's what covers the health insurance. And it's a solid day job. I am very pleased by it. It's a great group of folks. I worked very hard to get that job, and I'm delighted with it. I am also a developer for Freeport and Pathfinder compatible products for Green Ronin Publishing. I've actually had that job a little longer. And that's where I am the person that oversees the planning and production of the Freeport products and the Pathfinder compatible products, which are frequently the same product for the venerable Green Ronin group. I am also delighted to get to work with them. I am also the lead project manager for Wright Publishing. I've got a long history with Wright Publishing. And in this case, I am the person who keeps an eye on what's the schedule, who does it need to go to next, do we have a piece of cover art planned for it, etc. I am also the founder and publisher for Rogue Genius Games, which is a tiny little company that originally largely existed so that my friend and one of the owners, Stan, and I had a place to sell our PDFs. I wrote a lot of material for them, but now we have a lot of other writers and some partners we work with to produce stuff. So, and then I have a website, owencasey.stevens.com, which has a Patreon that supports it, and I do the occasional bit of freelance.
The occasional bit of freelance.
The occasional bit of freelance.
Really don't. Okay, so let's talk about your freelance, since apparently you don't understand the concept of, having only one job. Do you think it's necessary that you have to work with 4 different companies?
Is it necessary? Well, I mean, I do live near Seattle. It's expensive out here. There's a meme that goes around that says, try a cookie warmed in our Owen. And anytime anyone shows that meme and tags me and laughs, I'm like, look, man, Seattle's expensive and a job's a job. If I can get above minimum wage warming a cookie, fine. And they're delicious. Don't knock it till you've tried it. Okay. But these aren't. I could probably do with fewer jobs, and only the Paizo job is a full-time job, right? The rest are part-time at various degrees. I have had stretches of freelance where I was regularly doing 90 to 100-hour weeks. So you wake up, you roll from the bed to your computer, you type for 16 to 18 hours, and then you roll back into your bed and you sleep for 6. I've done that for weeks or even months at a time. This is less stressful than that is. Maybe it might not a lot, and it does involve a couple of commutes, but it's still easier than trying to get the bills paid at 2 cents a word, right? I've done that, and it's tricky, it's difficult. But also, all of these jobs give me something. I love being a developer at Paizo. Paizo's just at the very top of the tabletop hobby game industry field. They're one of the biggest companies in America that does that kind of games and role-playing games. Pathfinder is my favorite role-playing game. And so the opportunity to see how the big end of the industry works, to work with the developers there and the designers there, and for that matter, the editors who I'm sure cursed my name the first time I was hired, that does me a lot of good, and it's something I appreciate, and it's a job that I think develops me as a person and as a career. I think Green Ronin also has some of the smartest game designers in the world. Being able to talk to them and rub elbows with them is something that I was really delighted by when it originally happened, and I still, every year, every month, there's something that one of them will say where I'll go, yeah, no, I wouldn't have thought of that. You're right. That's smart. For Wright Publishing, I get to be a project manager, and that is a very different set of skills. And Miranda Russell is a very smart organizer and company runner, so I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of that. Steve Russell was a good friend of mine. I was very impressed by what he put together, and I always told him that I wanted to do something with Right someday, and we didn't manage to make that happen then, so I'm delighted to get to do it now. And then Rogue Genius is, I mean, I own a good chunk of that, and I'm the founder of that, and so I'm never going to give up the thing I own, right? This is the thing that if I walk to some other job someday, and heaven forbid it's been struck by a meteor, and so that paycheck isn't coming anymore, I always have the option of going back to Rogue Genius. As long as I'm around, Rogue Genius exists. So these jobs all do different things for me, and I think they all advance my career and my advancement as a person in different ways.
Yeah, those are solid answers. They're believable answers. You know, it's not like you're slacking the slack or you're trying to show off. You know?
I'm glad you approve.
You know, it's very high level. I like to keep it, you know, calm like that. So let's say, let me see. We've known each other now how many years now? What?
Well, sometime after 2000,
right.
Like 03, 04, something like that. So more than a decade, anyway.
Yeah. So it's, and for us, it's based. I'm sure it was D20 Modern that probably got us, you know.
That might have been how we first started talking. The first work I did for you, of course, was for Neo Exodus.
Yeah.
I mentioned on LiveJournal, which was the height of technology at the time, that a whole bunch of people owed me money in the industry, and they're not people I'm working with at the moment, and they weren't paying me, and I wasn't sure I was going to pay the electric bill. And so Lewis responds on my LiveJournal, "Hey, you write me something. I can't pay you much, but I'll pay you within 24 hours of you turning it over." And I was like, it might not be much, but wow, getting money in 24 hours would be nice. So Lewis has the record. The first thing I wrote for him, which was for Neo Exodus, which was, I think, about 5,000 words long.
Yeah.
He paid exactly what he said he'd pay me, right? I agreed to it. You guys can argue about how much you should get paid per word for a project, right? But if the creator says, I can pay you this much, you say, yes, I'll work for that much, the creator is no good by you. They are doing what they said to. He paid me within an hour of me turning it over by PayPal. And that I'm sure, you know, he was awake. We were both awake at 3 a.m. or whatever. But
yeah.
But I sent it in, and he said, great, here's your money. And that was an hour later. And so I had plenty of time to transfer that to my bank account and cover an electric bill, right? So I wrote 2 or 3 things for him. And it was to fill it. Again, my jobs tend to be to fill specific gaps. In this case, the gap was the power's going to get shut off. But I like the work I did for that, and I'm glad that I get to add Lewis Porter Jr. and Neo Exodus. It's one more group I've worked for over the course of the industry. But yeah, that was like a decade or maybe 12 or 13 years ago.
Yeah, thanks for making me feel old. I really did. You know, when you really start thinking about like how long it's been a wow, good Lord. And you know, I think we were fans of each other just because I know we both like modern, I know we both like superheroes.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's just one of those kind of, you know, we're in the same universe. And now let's get into it, because I know people are asking. Other people are asking. Okay, Starfinder, what can you tell us?
So we're going to release this product from Paizo called Starfinder. It's coming out Gen Con 2017, so that's next year. We are launching our private playtest soon, so sorry if you don't know that you're going to be in the playtest. If we haven't talked to you about that already, you probably aren't. There might be another playtest or some playtest-like things happening later, but we need to get some very focused feedback pretty early. So we've been talking about that being a closed playtest for quite a while. And it is a game system that is its own game system that is designed very, very much on the same principles as Pathfinder, and we're going to have a certain amount of Pathfinder compatibility. We expect that you'll be able to take like monsters from Pathfinder and run them in Starfinder with just minimal adjustments, which means that as soon as the book comes out, right, there'll be all of these bestiaries of stuff that you can use. It is set in an alternate future of the same universe, so you get to see what is going on in space and in the galaxy in the future of what's going on with Golarion. And we are trying to make this its own game. Our number one concern is always what is best for the game. There are things that we have changed because we think that is the best way to do a science fantasy game. Because this is a game where advanced technology and magic are both very well accepted, very understood forces in the universe. And they work together, and people blend them, and people focus on one or the other. And it's just like any other source of power in that regard. But we're trying to put together a game where instead of saying, hey, you can explore anywhere in the inner sea, right? We've got one region. Or you can explore anywhere in Golarion. Here's roughly what the world's like. Or even, you know, we did Distant Worlds, where we said, hey, you can explore anywhere in the solar system. We are developing a game that says, hey, here's a galaxy. And we don't promise you're restricted to that one galaxy. Maybe there are ways to go to other galaxies. The scale of this means that it will not be possible, no matter how popular this is, no matter how many books we put out, no matter how long the game goes, it would not be possible to present everything you could possibly run into. So one of our guiding principles is to try and write things so that it is both easier and more welcoming for a GM to say, I have an idea, I want the players to get caught, let's say, in a trash compactor. They're in a giant space station, well, a generic space station, and they're in a trash compactor, and I want to run that like some sort of trap. How do I do that? Rather than just saying, hey, here are a whole bunch of traps, and here are some tables you can use so that if you figure out exactly the amount of damage you can do and add that to the, is it a magic trap, etc. We are putting together a system that says, hey, do you want a CR8 trap for your CR8 Starfinder adventurers? Here's some guidelines. Here's what the stat block looks like. Here's how it all gets put together. And sort of point out what the bells and whistles are. The hope is to do that with a lot of things so that designing monsters is not as time-consuming and onerous as perhaps it is in Pathfinder. Traps, hopefully the same deal with poisons, and there's a lot of pieces where we want to be able to tell you, if you decide that you've gone to the planet of explosive petunias, we want you to be able to present that quickly so you can get to the fun of people running around and screaming because their petunias blowing up. So that is one of the underwriting design principles. There's a Starfinder forum on Paizo. If you go to paizo.com and go to the message boards, it's right on the left, and it says Starfinder in big letters. You can click on that, and then you'll be taken to a lovely piece of concept art. You can click on communications, and that has the whole list of current forum topics, which include things like there are people tracking everything we have said to date, right? So the list of what all of the classes are, we have mentioned, what classic races we are making core races, I believe we've listed. There are a few races we haven't revealed yet that we are still deciding to make sure we know exactly what we're doing with them. And then when we are, because we don't want to say, hey, there's going to be this cool race that does this thing, and then end up going, yeah, that's not good for the game. And then we have to keep excitement going from now till August of next year. So there is a brand concern to make sure that the Starfinder brand releases information in a pre-planned way. That, for example, one of the developers doesn't just blurt something out during a podcast without ever thinking about it.
That would be awesome.
But it might be awesome for you. It would be less awesome for us. But we're going to start with a single core rulebook. That core rulebook will have all the rules that you need for the game. It will have the basic setting information. It will have starship rules and ways to modify your starships. And we're putting all of that into one tome, which we hope will, in addition to having all that material, be presented in a streamlined, friendlier manner. It's not a secret that the original Pathfinder core rulebook was really targeting people who knew how to play the game and didn't want to change to a new edition of that game. And it does that job very, very, very well. But if you drop that thing in front of someone who has never played a role-playing game before and say, go, it does not do a lot of hand-holding. And that works for what it is, but we would like this to be an easier jumping-on point for people. How well we will do with those things are ultimately actually even decisions we don't get to make, right? It's the public that's going to get to decide how we made a fascinating, interesting, playable game that is both easier than what has come before and covers a whole lot more options. And that's a tightrope walk constantly, but we have some very, very smart people in the company doing stuff. And this is one of the projects I am most excited to have gotten to be part of since I have come to Paizo.
So let me ask the important question. Is it Star Wars or Star Trek? Or
So here's the thing about, is it Star Wars or Star Trek? If I give either answer, there are going to be people that get the wrong impression, right? So if I say it's Star Wars, there are going to be people that goes, oh, it's about more magical energies and less about science. Except that if I say it's Star Trek, there are going to be people that go, oh, you can run into the god Apollo who might grab your starship. In Starfinder, is it possible to run into a god sitting on a planet who gets ticked with you and he grabs your starship? Sure, this is the same universe as Galarian, so there are gods. Gods haven't gone away. Magic hasn't gone away. And if for whatever reason your starship is the thing that draws a god's attention, that you're going to have an issue, or rather an adventure. So I think we're trying to draw inspiration from a lot of places, and I think exploration is in many ways more of what we're focusing on. That is more of a Star Trek trope. There aren't necessarily, in the classic Star Wars stories, there isn't nearly as much exploration. It's more about fighting a larger war. That's a plot you could do, absolutely. There are also nods to some of my favorite science fiction that people never ask about, right? I'm a fan of the Lensman series. I'm a fan of Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders, which is science fiction. It's presented with a very fantasy cloak over it. But one of the things I think would be a cool thing to do is to have an adventure where your starship crash lands on a fantasy planet where technology isn't real common, but magic really is, and you deal with that very different culture and that different set of assumptions. That's a lot closer to an Anne McCaffrey type storyline if you go to some of the early Dragonfall and when they first arrive on Pern and all that stuff. There are things like Heinlein's Magic Incorporated, which talk about the legal implications of various spells, right? That's another thing that you perfectly well could do. We're not going to put a complete legal code in. We are trying to have the kinds of interesting options and interesting systems. So if those are the stories that appeal to you, you won't go, oh, they have hard-coded that every starship has a transporter in it, so I guess we're not going to have a whole lot of fighters because we don't need, even Star Trek doesn't really need shuttles most of the time. You just transport people on board. There are some things like we've discussed that there's going to be a form of hyperspace. That's because if you can't beat the speed of light somehow, you cannot explore a galaxy. And there are going to be some things that, even with advanced technology, that we say, you know, this is the realm of magic. Magic does this thing, and technology does not do that as well. The flip side of that is, like, fire damage and electrical damage are no longer the primary domain of magic. It is pretty easy to get a flamethrower and a taser gun and even a cryo cannon is the sort of stuff that we've already said exists in the technology of that universe. So if you're playing a soldier as opposed to a fighter, right, you may well decide a sword or even a chainsword or even a quantum curve blade isn't what you're looking for. I want the heavy plasma cannon or the flamethrower or the grenade launcher, and that gives you a wider range of the sort of thing you can do. And yes, we have done a great deal of work to try and make sure that when you get those weapons, when they are realistic options for your character, that they will work well within the assumptions of the game mathematically.
Okay. So, moving along with that, for my own personal, needs, there will be an OGL, of course.
So I believe that I mean this is an OGL product. It's based on Pathfinder. So since it is going to be a derivative product based on Pathfinder, even without there being an official announcement, I would assume that there would have to be an OGL in the back. The real question is, will there be a Starfinder compatibility license so you can use some of the things that aren't necessarily open, right? Proper names aren't necessarily open. Some of the background systems aren't necessarily open. For that matter, if we were to create a brand new system that didn't interact with anything that has come before, we wouldn't have to open that up just because we're putting it in an OGL game. I believe, and if I'm wrong, forgive me, people who control information, I believe it has been suggested that we are certainly looking at doing a Starfinder compatibility license. We haven't released one yet, and we certainly haven't given a timeline for when we will. But I would just, at a personal level, I'd be very surprised if there wasn't a Pathfinder compatibility license, and one very, very quickly. Paizo has done the Pathfinder compatibility license. Paizo not only sells third-party products on their website, but their blog post will periodically say, hey, look at all the cool third-party stuff that is available. At PaizoCon, Liz have classically done a how-to third-party even seminar that says, look, we want you to be successful. We encourage our third-party partners to do stuff well within these guidelines properly so that no one has any problems, so that you can be successful and do cool things. One of the reasons I like working for Paizo is that my interaction with Paizo as Rogue Genius and before as a member of Super Genius were almost universally positive. I mean, yes, occasionally said, ooh, can we have an exception to do this thing? You don't let anyone else? And they'd go, no. But generally speaking, instead of the attitude being, I worked with a lot of companies on OGL stuff, and sometimes the attitude is very much, we're going to touch it as little as possible. We want the OGL declaration to be as obtuse as possible. We want to just skate under the legal minimum and then not work with anybody. And I understand why some companies do that. And of course, not every company do that. I'm not trying to call anyone out. But Paizo's always been very open. Liz Courts, who has moved on to bigger and better things, and I hope she's very, very successful, but I called her the patron saint of third-party Pathfinder publishers for a reason. If I had any problem, I was always able to ping her. And if she found a problem of compliance in a product of mine, right, I always got a polite note, hey, we haven't put this up yet because it turns out this image on your cover violates what we see as our trademark. This is what we would like to see you do. And that was always very, very polite, very easy, very friendly, which I really appreciate. It just makes the entire publishing environment more pleasant to be in.
I know for myself, being third party, I've never, like I said, I've maybe had one issue in the past, and the entire time that I've done stuff for Pathfinder, so I'm like, I'll take that, and it was it wasn't even like, oh my god, please tell me to pulp 10,000 books and
Right.
artists on fire, and nothing like that. So it's like, oh, okay, oh, change this, oh, I'm sorry, oh, this isn't open yet, oh, okay, great, well, wait, look,
Yeah, well, and the people at Paizo know and understand and appreciate the OGL, right? If you look in our bestiaries, you will see that in the back of, I think, all of them, there are notes about which creatures we took and adapted from whatever Tome of Horrors book, right? Be that the complete Tome of Horrors or whatever. There was an official Pathfinder article that went in Kobold magazine. There's been a lot of cross-pollination with these things. And that's because if there's something that's fascinating and good and it fills a niche that we want filled, we are not afraid to go grab it. For the most part, because we have gone our own direction, mostly Paizo does stuff from scratch, right? They've got some very smart people that don't have any reason not to do stuff from scratch, and that way they control every aspect of it. But there are templates from both versions of the Advanced Bestiary that have been pulled out and used when that seemed like the smart thing to do. So I've appreciated the way that they are happy to use the OGL when that is what they think makes their storytelling work best. And again, it's one of the things that makes me happy with Paizo as a company, and one of the reasons why I was really happy when they asked if I wanted to be part of the company.
Okay, for myself, this is purely for me. All right, spaceships. Eric Mona already play tested it. He said he tried it out. He liked it a whole lot. Have you been doing more play testing with the spaceships? Because look, I'm just going to tell you bluntly, I'm going to make self-replicating minds. I've always liked that idea. I think it works well. I think it worked well in D20 Future, and I'm going to do it. So I'm telling you right now, unless you've stolen and put it on there already, which would upset me. But self-replicating minds is something we're going to be doing on my starship.
For a range of reasons, I'm not going to tell you whether we're going to have self-replicating minds in the core rulebook or not. And one of the reasons is, if we hadn't thought of it, I may go do it Monday. And if we have thought of it, it may get cut for space before the book comes out, right? This is one of the reasons why we're always until the thing's been sent to the printer, stuff can change down at the very last moment, right? If we're doing
change last minute, what are you talking about, Owen?
Absolutely. That never happens. If we are doing an editing pass the week before it goes, and someone says, "Hey, during this editing pass, I just realized that you've never explained what hit points are," and we'll all go, "We're idiots. We have to explain what hit points are," and then something will have to be cut to make room for that. I am reasonably sure we've explained what hit points are, but just the reason we have a bunch of different eyes taking a look at these things is to make sure that the most obvious stuff that we can possibly help doesn't get missed. There has been more play testing of the Starship system since Eric Mona made his comments. There is yet more play testing coming. There are things that we have looked at as a result of the play test where we went, this is a solid B. What do we have to do to make this an A+? Sometimes, honest to God, I suspect the answer will be, well, I think this is an A+, he thinks it's a B, he thinks it's a B, he thinks it's an A-, and so we won't necessarily be able to make a system that is all things for all people. But Jason Bowman did the core mechanical work on the Starship system. I have looked at it with a fairly jaundiced eye. I did a lot of Starship works for 3 editions of the Star Wars role-playing game. I've looked at vehicle and such systems for things like Gamma World D20 when I was working on that. I believe we will have a fun, robust, sturdy system for starships. That said, we are including starships because obviously if you're doing a science fiction story that spreads a whole galaxy, you may want a starship. That's a common trope. On the other hand, you might not want a starship. Not every science fiction story is focused around a starship. So one of the tricky parts of this is try and make sure that we can say, if you want an adventure that involves starships, we have thought about starships from the beginning. If you don't, we don't make them mandatory. And that is one of the trickiest parts, because you can add a starship to a Pathfinder game, right? You can say it's this big, it holds this many people, it has this many hit points. But that was not something that was being considered when Pathfinder was first being put together. So no matter what you do, it will have a bolted-on feel to it. Either the starship is going to be able to do things that makes it very, very difficult for certain published adventures to work well, or it's going to not feel much like a classic science fiction starship. There are people that got very excited about some of the previous science fantasy D20 games and pre-D20 games. A lot of people like Spelljammer. Spelljammer is not necessarily a tone we are going for, and we're certainly not trying to duplicate it. But could you decide to try and take these systems and make a Spelljammer game? I'm convinced you could if that's what excited you. Dragonstar was very popular with a lot of people, and I certainly understand why. And if that is what you're excited by, are we giving you the tools you can do to try and do that? I hope so. I think we are. Our number one concern is we are giving you the Starfinder setting. Will these rules let you play the most fun game of Starfinder? It's our number one concern, and I'm convinced that we are. I'm also going to be looking at the feedback from the playtest really with a very suspicious eye anytime anyone says, this doesn't work, or this is obviously always the best option, or this isn't any fun. Those are the things that scare me the most. There are other things they can say that are going to get my attention, right? If they say, hey, you say this about gods in Starfinder, and that exactly violates something you said in Pathfinder, certainly we'd look at that. Would that cause us to throw out something that worked brilliantly? No, I like to believe we're smart enough that we'd find a way to square that circle and make both statements work where they need to work. But, once you have starships, there are things that you have to think about. There's a question just when you're watching science fiction movies, right? So the Millennium Falcon can fight and hold off an entire Star Destroyer, or it can fight and hold off 2 TIE fighters. Both of those are exciting, dangerous encounters. Those starships are on very different scales. So how to present a system that can do all of those things is really tricky. And like anything, I mean, there are legitimate, interesting fantasy characters that you can't play in Pathfinder because Pathfinder isn't designed for that. You talked about superheroes, right? You can make someone that inspires you to play like the Hulk. But you can't play the Hulk because the Hulk can hold up a mountain range. A whole mountain by himself because he's ticked. There's no way we can let you play that character unless we are putting you in a series of adventures that are only designed for that character, which means that the person that just wants to play a squire doesn't get to interact on the same range. But we can play someone who gets stronger as they get madder and is bigger than usual. But that all has to fit on a scale. The scale for Pathfinder is already sort of from just out of Squire School all the way up to I can challenge the direct agents of the gods. And if you include Mythic, a step up from that. So we can do some of that with scaling, right? If you've got what's the difference between being 5th level and having the Millennium Falcon and being 20th level and having the Millennium Falcon? There ought to be a difference. We're working on all those questions. And especially since we're going to be doing more playtesting, other than assuring you, yes, there will be starships. Yes, I think there's going to be a place for third-party support. And I know you. If we've already done replicating mines, you'll think of something else. Right. But no, I don't think we are anywhere near being ready to say, here's the starship system for you all to know how it works already.
Okay, those are fair questions. All right, now here's something. Let me see. Let's go a little D20. Let's go more OGL kind of open. I know you're a big fan of mechanics.
Yep.
What is your favorite mechanic ever? I mean, ever built for D20?
Wow, that's tricky. So favorite is a really interesting word. And because if I'm saying what do I think is the most elegant, That's one set of possibilities.
You know, I'll say this because it's only fair. What one do you go, that was brilliant, and I wish I thought of that?
So I played a lot of second edition D&D, and I even wrote articles for second edition D&D. So my career started during the second edition D&D days. And for people that don't remember, in second edition D&D, your saving throws were things like breath weapon, rod, staff, or wand, petrification, or polymorph, which means you have to ask yourself, if I've got a spell that casts petrification out of a staff, what's my saving throw? And if I'm doing a science fiction game, do we use rod, staff, and wand for a ray of disintegration? Because that's not a rod or a staff or a wand. So the thing that I am most impressed by about D20 is that they did two things early on, leaping onto that third edition. Because third edition was they took some big risks. I know that there are things that were sacred cows that they saved, right? We have the same 6 attributes. But they boiled things down to core concepts that you can apply in different ways. So I've got a will save, which is my mind working properly. I have a fortitude save, which is my general body operating the way it's supposed to. And I have a reflex save. Did I get out of the way of something that is an area that is not just targeted at me personally? Those 3 concepts can easily be translated to a whole range of things, right? If you are making reflex saves against explosions, what is that in a fantasy game? Well, that's fireball. What is that in an Old West game? Well, that's a collapsing mine or a stick of dynamite. What is that in a modern game? Well, that's a hand grenade. What is that in a far future game? Well, that's a blaze bomb or an area array. What is that if we are doing a Call of Cthulhu game? Well, we've got fungi polyps that pop and they have spores and they might or might not get on you. The fact that they were able to take things that had originally been very, very different specialized systems and boil them down to a few systems, and those core blocks could have more core blocks, that has always been what I've been most impressed about D20, right? We have 6 different ability scores, but for all of them, a 14 is a +2 modifier. What that applies to differs, but it means I have a sense that if I've got a 14 int and you've got an 18 strength, you're stronger than I am smart. It is really difficult to actually have a sense that that is the case in second edition D&D. Yes, you have a 14 and I have an 18, but I've got a better percentage on various rolls and you've got a greater, there's no real direct correlation other than the stat number itself. And being able to say, that means that with those not necessarily correlating, you can't necessarily say, hey, here's a spell that gives you +4 to int in second edition. And everyone knows how that works, because I'll have to go back to the chart and check everything on that chart. How much did that increase? It's not linear, right? Did that increase by 1 or by 8 or by 16% or by an extra D3? By making those all work the same way, we can say if you get +2 int, you know exactly what that's doing for you. You know everything on your character sheet that's modified by int. If you have something like Hero Lab can have that all worked in. So you go +2 int and it says all the calculations are done. And it means that something that gives you +2 int is easy to balance against something that gives you +2 strength is easy to balance against something that gives you +2 charisma. If you're not doing anything with your charisma, it's not as useful for you, but you knew that. If you are using your charisma, it should be as useful to you as someone who's using their int. These things always have some flexibility. There's always a range depending on your exact build, but having those all be on a scale that was consistent and made sense and added things in the same kinds of ways made it much easier to build systems on those systems. That's the part that I wish I'd thought of.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a very interesting. Looking at it very, very, it's very simple, but so complex. The more you can add to it. Okay, let's ask another dumb question. I'm sure some people like me. I'm kind of curious. What's your favorite race, favorite class?
My favorite for Pathfinder?
Yeah, for Pathfinder.
My favorite race is dwarf. I have the beard for a dwarf. And currently my favorite class is War Priest, which is one of the things from the Advanced Class Guide. It's a hybrid class between fighters and clerics for people that don't know. The funny thing is, the playtest version of the War Priest, I never got to play. I was, during the playtest, doing things like getting ready to move to Seattle. And there were changes made between the playtest and the final version that caused a huge number of people to declare that the War Priest is now useless. That a cleric is a better War Priest than the War Priest. That an Inquisitor is a better fighter than a War Priest, even though the fighter's supposed to be a fighter. And in my experience, the problem is that those people are trying to play a War Priest like either a fighter who has spells or a cleric that has a better weapon. And in fact, you have to play a war priest like a war priest. One of the things that happens when I play my war priest is I don't generally, unless I know for certain that a fight is going to be difficult, I don't bother to cast buffing spells in advance, because I've got fervor, and if I decide I have to buff myself in this combat, I can do it as a swift action by burning a point of fervor. As a result of that, my spells last longer. Yes, I don't have as many spells as the cleric. The cleric's trying to buff everyone, and he's trying to buff the fighter. And if he has to buff himself, he has to take time to buff himself that he's not doing other stuff. With my war priest, I can be in the middle of a fight, ho to ho to ho, everything's going fine. And then the GM's like, and then an ogre enters the room. And I'm like, oh, shit. This is now a different problem. I can solve this problem by burning a fervor and casting a buffing spell on myself. If you have time to buff in advance, or you want to take the time, you have blessings. So you have a different pool other than your spells that you can use to buff in different ways. And those blessings are tied to the domains of your god, which means the way you fight and get better is directly tied to who your deity is. And I have found there are some other specific combinations, right? Like my current priest has, for those of you that are keeping track of the specific list at home, he's got Power Attack, Furious Focus, Greater Weapon of the Chosen, and Vital Strike, which means even though my base attack bonus is low, I can run up to someone and make a Power Attack with Furious Focus, Greater Weapon of the Chosen with Vital Strike, which means I get to roll twice to determine whether or not I hit without taking any penalty to my attack roll from the Power Attack, because I have Furious Focus, and if I hit, getting to roll an extra base die of damage on top of the extra damage from the Power Attack.
Jeez, really? Come on.
That is a very effective combination, which the players of the game I'm playing it in have begun to ask me to call the usual, because they are sick of me saying, I will run up and Power Attack with Furious Focus, Greater Weapon of the Chosen, and Vital Strike. And then I got a Great Axe, so the Vital Strike is doing me a lot of good.
Oh,
and
nice.
Amusingly, it's not the best build for that. I would have been better off with someone that had a Great Sword or a Elven Curve Blade or a Falchion, because the higher threat range would have done me more good. But I didn't build this character looking to be effective. I built this character to be a righteous avenger of Angrad. He does that quite well. The other funny thing is that because I'm durable, right, I can heal myself as a swift action during the game. I've got full plate. I've got a lot of defensive options. When we have wizards casting buffing spells on people or any other spellcaster, they frequently go, well, I could buff the fighter, but the fighter can't heal themselves. I could buff the alchemist berserker, but they tend to just draw aggro and go down. You know what? Owen's character will be here for the whole fight. I know he will. He's hard to get rid of. I'll cast the buffing spell on him. So the fact that I am hard to get rid of makes me a popular target for the other people in our party to boost. And that makes me even more effective than I would be on my own.
You do know that a lot of people have just heard this. They're writing down the notes, and they're already planning. Oh, okay, War Priest. This is what I need to do. Okay, great. Thanks, Owen. And you,
Falchion or Greatsword are much better choices for this than Great Axe, folks.
There are not some GMs that are going to be cursing your name. You do know
there
that.
are also some fascinating feats. This isn't something that I do wish I'd thought of this, even though I only think of it sometimes. In the Advanced Class Guide, there are feats that add magical attacks to your attack, but only when you use Vital Strike. So there's like Touch of Winter, which you can slow someone down with cold, and there's an entangling attack. And these things have prerequisites, so they can be hard to qualify for. But again, as a war priest, you can get those prerequisites. And then you have this pool of things per day that I can add when I use my Vital Strike. So
I'm not going to say you're breaking the rules, because legitimately these are not breaking the rules. But it's nice when you know the rules as well as you guys do to go, you know, I can do this, this, and this, and do this, and this is awesome. Wait a minute.
What frequently happens is I accidentally stumble across an effective combination. Right, I did not plan this character to be this way from the get-go. I made a second-level War Priest because I asked what the group needed, and they said a front-lane fighter that can heal himself. Oh, okay, well, War Priest can do that. That's fine. They didn't have anyone in plate mail at the time. It was as things went, and I saw how my character acted, I would just look for, okay, what are the things that work well within what I am doing? And then you select options as you go.
It's hilarious because I'm reading in the thread of the people commenting, and it's just, you know, people, you know, and this is the quote. This is the quote from Scott Fernandez, totally taking notes from my Iron God's War Priest of Gorum. So, you know, what you've done is cause problems, again, to poor innocent GMs who just want to play and have a little bit of fun.
You'll want to use your bonus feats for the things like Vital Strike so that you can get them before your base attack bonus actually qualifies for them, which means you can get Vital Strike before you even have an iterative attack. At which point it doesn't matter that you can only make one attack with it. You don't get 2 attacks around yet anyway.
Yeah. There's somebody I can see somebody right now jumping up and down, screaming at the screen. I already know this is happening, so I'm just gonna let that go. Okay, here's a better question. What race and class do you hate? Do you actually like, I'd write that class out as a stupid class. I'd write this race out as just stupid. No, I mean, just totally.
So,
which one do?
There's no class I hate. There's no race I hate. There are some race class combinations I don't like playing, and I've tried it. I don't like playing any size small character as a melee combatant because you got a size small weapon. To quote Giant in the Playground, ooh, weapon shrinkage. And it is the way the game works. If you're a melee combatant, your job already is primarily to put out so many hit points that you can affect the universe based on what you can break, right? Other people get to fly and charm people and turn eggs into hydras at high enough level. Your job is to do so much damage that just doing damage can impact the world at large. There are ways to do this, especially if you get an adamantine weapon and you get to start to ignore hardness. You can, I can do 120 hit points in a single blow. I am now a threat to buildings. I can cut through the wall of something. If I want to tell the king that he'd better listen to me, it's not or I will polymorph him, it's or I'll hit the side of your favorite bridge and it will go down. But the things that let you do that frequently do not work well for being size small. Size small people also frequently have low movement rates. That low movement rate makes it difficult to get to the target you're trying to hit in melee. I've seen people do some brilliant things with it, but my style of play doesn't work well with these size small melee combatant. Size small spellcasters are kind of brilliant, right? Because it doesn't matter what my weapon is. A size small arcanist or wizard or even druid can druid especially, because the size of thing I wild shape into is not dependent on what size I am. So if I'm a halfling, I get to become a Tyrannosaurus Rex the same time everyone else gets to become a Tyrannosaurus Rex. This does get ridiculous if you have a giant druid, right? Because you'll have a giant, and at slow levels you can become a house cat. And it's just the shrinkage is huge, but there's a reason the game sets things up that way. So any 9-level spellcasters and a lot of 6-level spellcasters, I will happily play as size small. But I just gnomes and halflings and rat folk, or as I'm getting used to calling them, Ahsoki for Starfinder. Those don't work well for me as melee combatants in Pathfinder. And anyone who's keeping track, feel free to write that sentence down and look at it when Starfinder comes out and ask me more questions then.
Planning ahead, just planning ahead. All right, now here's something that I know that no one's asked you ever. I'm willing to bet. Watsy.
Yeah.
D20.
Yeah.
Superheroes. What happened?
D20 Spectaculars.
Yeah, I mean, what happened? Because I was one of those guys going, oh, I can't wait till this comes out. I want to see what Owen does with it. This is going to be so cool. How is Owen going to handle superheroes? And nothing.
So actually, I got asked that question a whole lot right after the project was canceled. So here is my official answer. I signed an NDA with Wizards of the Coast that prevents me from releasing any information about D20 Spectaculars until after the product's release. The product has not been released. Feel free to buy me a drink at a bar sometime at a con.
That hurts. I mean, so that one is dead. That one is officially dead. Never, never, never.
Well, I mean, they're not doing D20 Modern at the moment, so I can't imagine that they are. I don't know, right? I do not work for Wizards of the Coast. The people at Wizards of the Coast are smart people that take me by surprise a lot. If I woke up one day and I discovered that they are announcing that their next role-playing game is going to be D20 Spectaculars, the superhero role-playing game using the 5th edition engine, that's something I'd buy, right? I haven't heard anything to that effect. And if I had, it would be unofficial, and I couldn't tell you I'd heard it, although I wouldn't have told you I hadn't heard it. And I would be surprised if it happened. But I can't. I was a freelancer on that, right? Mike Merles was the lead designer. I was working with Gwendolyn Kestrel and Chris Perkins as the coordinators and developers for that. I liked where we were going with it. I think it would have been a neat product, but the D20 Modern line was ended, and you don't finish and lay out books that you don't plan to release, right? That just doesn't make sense. That's right. Throwing bad money after good. So I would love to someday get to test out some of the ideas I had for that. But the flip side of that is, if I like D20 and I want to play a superhero game, I've got Mutants and Masterminds.
Right.
I think Steve Kenson is one of the smartest, most creative, most empathic game designers, period. And he happens to have a spectacular specialization in superheroes. He can do absolutely anything. There's nothing I've seen him not be able to design, but he has a grasp of superheroes that is beyond what I think even most just superhero fans are. So, and John Lighthouser, who's the current M&M developer over there, is someone I play games with, right? So this is someone I know and trust and who does good stuff. Their writers are quite smart. So while I would have loved to have seen D20 Spectaculars, honestly, I suspect even if it would come out, I'd be paying Mutants and Masterminds much more than D20 Spectaculars. And not only does it come out, but it continues to be supported. So
it's kind of weird. You know, you as a creator of saying, no, I'd still play M&M. That's kind of interesting.
Well, and as I said, I suspect I would. I believe that was scheduled to be a 92-page book. I could be, or 96-page. I could be wrong about that. But just think about, I've got one 96-page book. Maybe it gets a D20 Futures like follow-up, but more likely it's going to be like D20 Past or D20 Apocalypse. Versus I've got the Emerald City book, and I've got the Liberty City book, and I've got an entire world laid out with the atlases, and I've got specialty books. It is, I'm sure I would have played a campaign of it, but for repeat value, I think Mutants and Masterminds has pretty well proven that it is a robust, well-supported, well-designed system, and it's hard to see anything that Wizards of the Coast would have had room to publish being able to compete with that for repeat play. If they decided to dedicate themselves to it, they probably could have, but it was always the plan that we have D20 Modern. Here's and I wouldn't have stopped playing D20 Modern, right? It's just that mostly if I was doing superheroes, I'd have gone somewhere else.
Yeah, it's funny you said D20 Modern. I mean, even for myself, we constantly keep selling PDFs for D20 Modern still. And I mean, that book's been out of print, what, 12 years? 10?
Something like that. Yeah, 10.
And I'm always amazed. It's like, who's still buying this stuff?
Well, I mean, if you have the D20 Modern Core Rule Book, you have a game, and you can play with that game for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours, and it doesn't matter if it's not being supported. And there is still a D20 Modern SRD out there, so all the rules are still available. You can find them and search through them. I personally, of course, wrote the Anachronistic Adventures campaign book for as a Pathfinder compatible book, and that is designed to do pulp-like action adventure using the Pathfinder rules. And I do know people that have bought that book and like it, who also buy third-party D20 Modern stuff to use to adapt to material for that book. I've always been a little surprised that you personally didn't put together your own D20 Modern core rulebook to sell.
I always thought about it, and I always go back to the problem with me, and this is 100% me. I love doing settings. I love doing settings. I love
do a setting in it.
It's like, and once again, I did Haven. I don't know. I don't want to do that genre again. I've done that genre. I love that genre.
So hire someone to take a D20 Modern SRD and your Haven setting and blend it into a single core rulebook you can sell. And then you can label all of your D20 Modern stuff as being compatible with D20 Haven.
It's like one of those things, maybe. Like I said, I like the weirdest things. I like the weirdest things when it comes to, what I find creative. Like, I mean, I did Neo Exodus. I did science fantasy. I always wanted to do that. I really enjoyed that book, and I want to do more stuff with that. But I'm even for myself, I mean, I'm sure you might even find this interesting, that I'm really looking at the living campaign and the organized play stuff a little bit more.
I've seen you and John Race talking about that.
Yeah, I'm getting kind of fascinated by the whole concept of it because, I'm not a huge video game player, but I like the concept of people playing online with other people and playing in an all shared world where what you do actually affects the play of the game and the story of the game. And, I mean, a lot of people don't do that. I mean, the closest thing that I remember was when Paradigm Concepts did that. JP Chapelot is doing with his stuff, is doing that. But it's like, you don't get to actually see a lot of direct, like, when I killed this guy in our game, it had this effect 3 adventures from now. But we saved this guy in this game, and it had this effect in this game here.
Pathfinder does have the interactive specials that they do at PaizoCon and at Gen Con, right? So that is sort of a slice of something similar to that. And we do take input on what people have been doing as we do the seasons and develop stuff together. Because our organized play team is a group of people who are much smarter and more dedicated than I am. Because I think it's the organization of getting that done that makes it something that normally only bigger, well-organized companies can pull off for a long period of time. But if you guys do it, I'll be fascinated to see what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing I did was I put something on the Facebook forum, and this is something that I'm stealing from somebody else. I don't even know who I'm stealing this from. And please forgive me if I've stolen this. Basically, I think it might have been Henry, actually, from Paradigm Concepts. You play an adventure where first you make two characters. We give you two characters. You make two characters, make them full out, boom. And you pick which one you want to play first and which one you play second. Well, the first one you play in a fantasy setting, big battle, big war kind of thing. The second character is a direct descendant of the first character, roughly 150 years. And now the new bad guy, the old bad guy is coming back again. So it's kind of that Babylon 5-esque, oh, you get to see the bad guy, and now you're playing a descendant. And there will be flashback moments where you get to play the original characters again during that whole event.
I want to mention here, Jason Bullman has recently launched a Patreon for his dramatic campaign that he's working on, which is going to be something very, very different, but it is specifically a place where he is trying to create a game experience that a lot of people haven't had. And I think part of what you're talking about is you are fascinated with the idea of a different game experience, right? That we're still gaming, we're doing what we're used to, but the end result ends up feeling and doing things you don't expect it to feel and do. And so I would love to see someone tackle an interactive system like that, but the same itch for me is similar to what I see when I look at Jason Bullman's plans, and I have because I work with him, I've been able to ask him questions that I wouldn't ask online. So I've got maybe a better idea where he's going with it. And I think it's another case of I am fascinated to see if he successfully creates this new experience from play with his dramatic campaign thing. And I'm also very fascinated to see him using it, how he is using Patreon to fund it, that he's using it for a discrete series of pieces. Pledge at this level and I will charge you that each time a module comes out. Because there are ideas that are really, really neat ideas that I perfectly well understand why big companies don't say, okay, we're going to go ahead and gamble the financial dice on doing this as our next 190-page book. I understand why they do that. I have made that decision or helped make that decision for various companies. But I do like the idea that there might be new ways for independent creators to say, well, I do want to take that risk, but I just literally don't have the money to do it. Or if I take the risk and I fail, I'll end up homeless. And see, hey, are you all willing to take this risk with me? And we can share the risk and we can all have this different play experience and have this product that wouldn't exist otherwise. So,
well, since you mentioned Patreon, and you know how I feel about that. What do you think of it? You've been on for a little bit. You've been developing a lot longer than I have. I've just been, I've finally said, okay, I'm really interested. Let me see the dynamics of it. I think Patreon is definitely going to be the Kickstarter 2.0. I think we're all going to be, as publishers and creative people, that's going to be the route for us for at least the next 3-4 years, unless something major happens.
Yeah, I mean, I am trying to learn to not try to predict what technology and society are going to do next, because it turns out I'm really bad at it. I did not predict Kickstarter, right? And when Kickstarter came along, I was part of Super Genius when Super Genius did a Kickstarter long before it took off as a place for role-playing games. So that was a timing thing, right? We actually launched our Kickstarter at the wrong time. We did it too early. But I do think Patreon is a fascinating venue that, you got things like Indiegogo and GoFundMe that are basically Kickstarter with different rules, right?
Right.
And Patreon actually has a number of different ways you can do things. So you can do a Patreon you could theoretically do it for a single thing, right? You could perfectly put together a Patreon and say, hey, I'm going to charge you this much per time I release a 300-page book, and I'm going to release one. And once you all have pledged to it, I'll tell you it's done, you'll get charged, and I'll send out the reward. That would be a little weird because that really is what Kickstarter is for. But one of the things that Bowman is doing is that he has a series. It's still a discrete set, right? I'm going to do, I think he said 6 of these. So he has a discrete set of pieces, and they are all interlinked, but that is part of a process. So he's saying, let me offer this to you in these discrete bits. I need you all to be pledging this much money. He's also really smart in that he said, hey, if you just want to be a player, you can take this level and only get the information a player needs. If you just want to be GM, you can get this level, or if you want the whole thing, you can pledge at this level. So that if you just want to play in a game and you and 5 of your friends get together and you're like, I'll run it, you all get to play in it, you can all just go pledge separately for the pieces you need. But that is a place where he's going to have a certain number of these come out and he'll get paid for them. And then if he wanted to do a print book later, he could either make that another offer there, or he could then take that to Kickstarter. My current Patreon, which you can find links to on my Facebook or on owenkcstevens.com, is currently basically a giant tip jar, right? Right now, my Patreon says, I've released a bunch of stuff for free on my blog. Do you like it? Give me money and I'll do it more. Give me a lot of money and I'll do it a lot more. And that's really all where it is at the moment. And there are reasons why I set it up the way I did. A lot of people commented very early, you go from no promise of a specific amount of material to a lot of material at $750. Shouldn't you break this all out into little tiers? That's great advice. Anyone who reads that and thinks it makes sense, don't not do it because I'm not doing it. I have specific reasons which are based on how my schedule and my workload, my agreements with different people work. I have a specific reason why the promises that I made what I'm doing make more sense for me. That probably does make more sense for you. So I strongly encourage you, if you're thinking about that, don't do what I do unless you discover you've got a real good reason to. Clinton Boomer has a pretty good, and you can find a link to his, you'll probably be able to find a link to his down below because Lewis is really good about linking to these things. Clinton Boomer has a very successful Patreon that I am very interested in being part of. But I also like that Patreon will allow me to say, I really like Liz Quartz. I like her as a creator. I like her personally. She has a Patreon. I don't always keep track of what's going on with it, but I really want to support Liz Quartz. I really do. I will give Liz Quartz X number of dollars each time she does this thing to this maximum. So you can just have this social element to it where I do not have an opportunity to take Liz Quartz out for coffee as much as I would like, right? I would be perfectly happy to take Liz out for coffee once a week. Scheduling and distance and timing and it's even harder for me to take Clinton Boomer out for coffee once a week. But I can say I want to be part of these people's lives. I want to hear about what they're doing, and I want to help support them in these endeavors. I am happy to shell out $3 a month to do that. That's not onerous. And if it ever is onerous, because folks, don't get me wrong, I understand that your social situation can change, right? My wife and I have at times been so poor that the only way we could make ends meet was to tell my friends, hey, if you all bring $5 to the game I'm running tonight, we'll feed you dinner. And then we used the leftovers to eat for the rest of the week, right? Because we could not afford groceries. I have been in the place where $5 for a couple of gallons of gas to determine if you can go register to vote is an actual limitation. I totally understand that. So if you can't afford to support people, don't. We all get that. One of the nice things with Patreon is it is not difficult to go, wow, my side of my house fell off. We need all of our money. I will suspend all these things. I'll come back and do them when I can afford them later, but for right now I have to stop. The other nice thing about things like Patreon is that it gives multiple ways to support people, because even if you can't spend money on some of your favorite creatives, if they have a Patreon, you have the opportunity to spread the word about their Patreon. One of the things that even Patreon says is that it is really hard to just go to Patreon and find someone you haven't heard of that you'd like to support, right? Their systems are set up well to do that. They're actually working on it. There are things like Facebook, but Facebook has an algorithm that decides who gets to see what post of mine. Twitter, if I put up a tweet, it's on someone's page as a new tweet for 30 seconds, depending on how many people are following, and then it's way, way, way down there. They'd have to come looking for me. So one of the things that people who want to support creatives to have Patreon can do is just say, hey, folks, this guy seems neat. What he's doing seems neat. And if you want to support him, here's a link. And you can do that once, and we will be delighted. You can do it once a month, and we'll be delighted once a month. You can do it once a day, and that will become annoying to your friends, and we don't want you to do that. So, I mean, decorum applies. But it creates this opportunity that if I know about the Patreon, then obviously I have some sort of online access. And if I have that online access, I have some method for saying, hey guys, I found this, it's cool. And that is no different from saying, hey guys, I found this music video that involves a girl trapped in virtual reality after the end of the world. And I think it's anime, but there's some discussion about that. You can link to that. You're showing something cool. This creator's trying to do this neat thing, or I like his blog. You can even just link to my blog, which is nothing but free content, and then people will see that I have a Patreon. So there are lots of, because I have tons of friends who can't afford to spare $3 a month. I'm sorry that they can't, but I understand that they can't. There are people in very hard times, and some of those people take the time to say, hey, friends of mine, here's the things Owen's doing, and I really appreciate that. I'm not overselling that even a little bit.
I know for myself, well, I'll tell people two things I've done that I think work to help get the word out for Patreon. I think it's worked the best way, and nothing's complex. The first one, give away free product, have an ad for the thing for Patreon in the back, because people take free, and people take free forever, which I think that's crazy. But I have my running joke. I have an art piece we've given away. It's Storm Cook, has 3 pieces of art we've given away for at least 8 years, and right, and everyone has downloaded it at one point. Everybody, because hey, it's free art. What's the worst that can happen? It's free. It didn't cost me anything. And usually, for anything you do, it's like put an ad in there. So if they click it and they see it, we might get them to go on that. The second thing, I'm gonna use a lot of air quotes.
I'm gonna interrupt you real quick. Hey, Jacob Blackman, if you're watching, you should consider releasing a piece of art for free through Rogue Genius that includes an ad to your Patreon. I'll remember to remind you later if you don't happen to be watching. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's watching, and I think it's hilarious that you said that, because I know I've said something very similar to him about doing something similar to that. But hey, like I said, if I was an artist, I'd be ruling the world. But I'll get in that part later. The thing that people should also think about doing is, I've heard rumors that if you put a banner ad, like maybe on your RPG Now site, that redirects to your Patreon in the footer or the banner section, you could put it for a little bit and then take it down, and then maybe put it up again and take it down. I've heard people doing something like that.
I don't think RPG Now banners are supposed to point off-site.
That's what I've heard, but I've heard some people in the streets don't always follow those rules.
Well, so here's my deal. I'm gonna stop stuffing my face and interject. The people at One Bookshelf, which is RPG Now, Drive-Thru RPG, have been really good to me throughout the course of the industry, right? They have taken me out to dinner. They have sat me down and asked me questions. I have had to write to them and go, Meredith, why is this thing I'm doing not working? And she'll very politely say, this thing that you just said you did it wrong. Here's what you should be doing. Oh, all right, thank God. So, one, I feel I have a social contract with these people. So if I think it's not what they want to do, I will either not do it or I'll ask if it's okay, because that's just how I like to do business. Two, if I think I am taking advantage of them somehow, that violates the social contract I feel I have with them, and I don't want to do that. So I won't tell you how to do business, and I won't tell anyone else how to do business unless they ask. But the way I like to do business, I do not want to take advantage of loopholes or not follow the rules to try and get an edge. Because for me, that's a short-term edge. I want the long-term edge. And to me, the long-term edge is the people at Drive-Thru going, Owen has always worked with us. He hasn't caused a problem. He makes a decent amount of money. And then if they have this thing where they're like, we're going to pick 20 publishers to give this opportunity, the first 15 will probably be their first 15 bestsellers. That just makes sense. But then when they're trying to decide the rest, I think my long-term advantage comes from them going, Owen's a straight-up guy. Owen hasn't caused a problem. We want to work with Owen.
Because, Owen, you're a good guy. Everybody knows that. That's why everybody loves you, Owen.
I am not kidding when I say that there was a point in my career where I began to wonder, should I be an asshole? Because that seems to be more successful for a lot of people, right? Is being an asshole about it? You can call it an alpha personality, or you can call it, not taking shit. But I seriously wondered, is that a better route for me?
I'll just say, having been a person who's been very vocal on, I've never shied away from controversy. It's just not in my nature. I would rather be you than me. You know, the moments of being me, there's some things where you have to go, well, I got to suck this one up and do this because this is something I would do, or something will pop up that irks me to my core and I can't let it go. Any smart man would be like, walk away from this. You don't have to fight every battle. But I'm like, nope, this one is mine, because it just gets stuck in your craw. It does.
I certainly understand that, right? And I try not to let things stuck in my craw interact with how I comport myself in business or online. Now, there is a difference. There are some people that do things that have stuck in my craw, and as a result of them doing it, I don't trust them anymore. That's not, it's stuck in my craw. That is, I have seen how you do business, and I'm afraid I will be on the dirty end of that stick someday. So yeah. I don't want, that's one issue. I have had conversations with people other than you where they said, yeah, I see where what you're saying is the smart choice, but someone else will benefit from that, and I can't have that person benefit. Okay, man, that's your call, right? If I have a choice of you and me both making 20 bucks or neither of us making 20 bucks, I will choose for us to both make 20 bucks. If I have a choice of me making 5 bucks and you 20, or me making 1, I'll take I make 5, you make 20. Because, and this is, I am long-term greedy. I'm greedy. There's no doubt about it. I have a master plan that involves retiring in comfort and only doing the things I want to. But I am long-term greedy. What can I do here that will not make me hate myself so that I have to spend more money on therapy, that will not cause other people to try and cause me problems, which will create expenses I do not foresee, that will make me not just a little money right now, but as much money over the course of my life, and I plan to live a while, so that the ultimate benefit is greatest. This is my version of greed. And it's a greed that says, if I can find win-win situations, right? Like, I love working with John Raced. And one of the reasons I like working with John Raced is that John Raced makes money if I make money, right? And so as a result, if I go to John and I tell John, just as a random example, hey, how would you feel about manually putting together a bundle with 200 products? Right? It would have been perfectly reasonable for John to go, no, you put together a bundle of 200 products and upload it as a zip file if you want to do that. Could have said it. Would have been perfectly reasonable. Instead, John Ray said, yeah, I mean, if we sell that, you'll make more money than I'll make, but I'll make some money, and you've worked with me on stuff, and you've promoted the site, and the community seems to like and respect you. I will make this extra effort for you. And he and I are both delighted with the results of that. And since there are more bundles, and whether they do as well or not, every bundle that comes through that does even a quarter of what we do is him making yet more money. And I'm delighted he's making money, because that means he will have prosperity and happiness and options for making his site better. And if his site gets better, then I will make more money.
You know, I totally get that, and I totally believe that. And that's always the weirdest thing for me, because I always think there's a problem with me. I'll just put it out there, that I've been doing this so long, and I'm so stuck in my way of doing it. For me to get up and do it a different way, it's you know, I'm an old man. It's like, oh God, I gotta get up and move over here, and it's like, dude, and it's difficult, because it's like, with John's always like, why don't you put more stuff on my site? I'm like, oh, I'll get to it. And it's like, you know, like I said, I've been doing this now. God, even when I think about it like this, I've been doing this now 17 years. Yep. You know, I remember when it was just like me, Phil Reed, and Gareth. Yep. And it was just the Wild West, you know, and that's how I remember it. And that's how I kind of see it like now, but it's a little more civilized, but it's still kind of the Wild West. And back then, you get in conflicts with people, you know, because at first, everyone was in their own little section doing their own little thing. And then there was like a little bit of bleed over. But then it's like more new people came, and kind of the rules that we established when we were working at it kind of have fallen apart. And it's basically, it's a Wild West. Anything goes. You can do anything out there now, which is great. But at the same time, it's like, you know, it's like there's a publisher that drives me crazy that takes open content and other people's products and just packages it in his products and releases it at a lower price. And fundamentally, yes, that's what the OGL does. That's what it's supposed to do. And it's okay to do that, but it's not in the spirit of the OGL.
Well, I think that varies, right? I mean, we did the feat resource document. And the feat resource document basically takes all the feats from all of the non-hardback books that Paizo has done and re-releases them. Now, there's some value added in that there are, I think, 3 examples of us looking at a feat and saying, oh, that feat is just not usable. And then we presented the original feat, and then we said, by the way, here's our suggested rewrite. The other thing is that because those feats very often are intermixed with non-OGL material, with product identity material, I did the job of scrubbing everything, and that requires a certain level of expertise, so I can go through and say, Iomade is not a gobbledygook word, right? Iomade is a specific deity, and she's closed content, and so this or a pathfinder, right? Pathfinders are a specific content, and so I redid all that, and I organized it, and I created some imaginary world source books so that you could, in the campaign, if you wanted a bunch of Asian related stuff for your campaign, I've created imaginary source books that you can add so that the players know where this content is coming from to theme it. But at its core, the vast majority of that book is we took someone else's open content and we just re-released it.
Yeah, but like I said, and there's a difference there. There's a fundamental difference because I think calling what it is a resource. That's like, okay, great. Oh, everybody's stuff's in there. Okay, great. Oh, I can use it. Great. This is perfect. I want to do an Asian setting. I'd love to do Asian feats. They're all in one location. Hey, thanks, Owen. I really appreciate that. That's one thing. I think that is totally different than just saying, oh, you got some lovely feats. Let me take these feats, 20 new feats from you. And it's like, that's not 20 new feats. That's,
I am of the opinion that the market will correct anyone that is not bringing enough new value to what they're doing, right?
But like I said, I think for you and me, you want to be creative at least. I think you should do something creative. If it's not just OGL content, maybe it's the soft.
If I think there's something that is entirely uncreative, useful, appropriate, and profitable, I'll just pay someone else to do it. I'll still get it done, right? There are always people saying, hey, Owen, what can I do for you? And I am perfectly happy. I mean, when I did the feat resource document, right, there's someone else credited in there because she took the work to go grab all the feats. I had to resource them all, but she gave me a document that said, here's everything. And I pay her for that. The bundle did very well for her. There were hundreds of dollars involved as a result of her tiny slice of the... I think she ended up being very, very surprised how much money total she ended up making for that. Because, again, it's a royalty situation, so I never would have guessed that bundle was going to make so much money, or that the products in it would therefore make so much money. And therefore, when I was figuring out how much to pay her, if I had paid her just a flat rate, I wouldn't have paid her enough.
Right.
I wouldn't have known I wasn't paying her enough. We would have come to an agreement and she'd have been okay. But what she's made now is so much more than she would have. And it's like 2 years after the feat resource document came along. So there is that whole delayed gratification thing, right? I believe last time I calculated how much I have earned on the Genius Guide to the Dragon Rider, which is the very first Genius Guide for Pathfinder. I believe I am up to 39 cents a word.
That's a good deal.
That's a lot of money. Yeah, right. That's great. And this time next year, maybe it'll be up to 40 cents a word. And
right.
That number could be off because I'm not looking at it at the moment, right? But I remember when it hit 10 cents a word. I was delighted when it hit 10 cents a word. And I remember when it hit 20.
No, it's like that. I want to produce product that I find useful. That's why I don't want to put like just generic stuff. I know for me, it makes me happy to do stuff that's setting specific, but I don't want to just do a generic thing because other people are doing generic stuff. I want to do something that's when people go, "Ooh, that's cool. I never thought about that." And
and there's a conversation you and I have both had. You have to decide what it is you want from your company. If what you want from your company is to be brought happiness by every product, then obviously those are the decisions you should make. I certainly make products for Rogue Genius that I want to be happy with. And from my point of view, if I do something boring that I don't give a shit about, that other people are excited by, that brings me a lot of money, that expands my opportunities to do things that make me happy later. And you have a great machine. People recognize your name. You've got a great backstock. I personally think that there are opportunities that, because you don't want to do stuff you don't find interesting, where you are missing an opportunity where you could pick anybody who is in the lower stages of their career and say, hey, I'm Lois Porter Jr. I want you to do this really boring but useful and appropriate thing, and I will pay you 4 cents a word for it because I know it will make tons of money. And I don't care about it, but other people will. And then you sit on your tons of money and you go, all right, now I can use this money to get more art.
Well, see, now you've got me on that one. That's and you're funny enough, that's exactly kind of how I got Jeff Lee. I said, hey, I don't, and I push Jeff all the time because I think, mentally I don't think I've actually abused him, but I've given Jeff some jobs that I didn't think anyone in their right mind would ever want to take. And like I said, his first gig with us was doing 48 stat blocks. And like, who does that? Who says, yeah, I'll take that gig?
I did that gig more than once. When I was working at Wizards of the Coast, and I was put on my first project with Jeff Grubb, right? And my reaction is, Monster Manual 2, Jeff Grubb, right? I mean, this is one of the icons of the industry to me. And he's like, we're going to do some Star Wars stuff. And I don't know the Star Wars rules nearly as well as you seem to. So I'm a little worried that the stat blocks will take longer. And I wish I had more time to do this interesting stuff. And I was like, Mr. Grubb, I will do your stat blocks, right? We'll divide the labor. You do all the creative, fun stuff you want so we have the best possible product. And I will write all the stat block, all the Starship stat blocks, all the monster stat blocks, all the NPC stat blocks. I'll do all the stat blocks. And it was like 45% of the word count was stat blocks when you include Starships. And so it was like, well, it's 45%, but I think it's a lot more work. So great. And that is what we did with that product. Now, what's the benefit from that? That was Tempest Feud. Tempest Feud is, to the best of my knowledge, the first Star Wars tabletop role-playing game product ever to be the basis of a novel. It's the novel Scourge, which is an official Star Wars novel. And in the foreword to Scourge, there's a thank you to me and a few other people that worked on Tempest Feud because Jeff Grubb wrote that novel, right? So I did this grunt work, and now I have a thank you in an official Star Wars novel. I'm very happy with how that worked out. It's a 15-year gap between these things happening, but
they happened. Look, it happened. That's all it counts. It's like, look, I think and this is another issue I've always had with this industry. We work in probably the most creative, most focused, most innovative industry, but we suffer from one of the weirdest things that I don't get. It just drives me crazy because I look at the video game industry a lot. That's always my comparison. I still don't get why they just don't come in, see our stuff and go, we're going to buy this, we're going to buy this, we're going to buy this, we're going to buy this. Here's a pile full of money, you guys. Just have a nice day. Just walk away with this money. You guys are going to be happy, and we're going to make this into a game, and people are going to love it, and we're done. Because, let's be honest. They can buy us cheap.
Well, so here's the thing. When the video game industry likes what someone produces, they don't buy what he produced. They buy the guy. Right? If you look around at people who were working at Wizards of the Coast at the same time I was,
yeah.
Andy Collins works with video games. J.D. Weicker works with video games. A lot of these people, if that person has done the work and people are impressed with what they do, the video game industry just says, well, we are going to offer you much more money, no more security, but much more money to do that sort of thing over here for us. They do occasionally buy the material, right? Crimson Skies was a role-playing game and became very big for Xbox. There's been a lot of video games for Warhammer 40K. There have been a lot of video games for D&D. There have been a lot of video games for Shadowrun.
I'll say the one that sent me the most, and this is a personal one, Deadlands. How don't you do Deadlands?
But why bother when you can just do Red Dead Redemption and add zombies?
That's one of those. Why? To buy that license, well, even back then, couldn't have cost that much. The ideas were there, the history was already done, and
right. But here's the thing with Deadlands. If I know Deadlands exists, if I'm a video game producer and I know Deadlands exists, and I look at it and go, "That's cool." What's cool about it? Well, it's the Old West, but with monsters. Well, if that's what's cool about it, I now have that for free. It's the Old West with monsters. I now have what I think is cool about it. Now, if what you think is Deadlands is specifically the history of Ghost Rock and Professor Hellstrom, if that's the stuff that you get excited by, then yeah, you go, well, I want those specific things, so I'll buy them. But if you look at it and you go, the Old West with steampunk and monsters is awesome, but I don't need to pay them anything for that. I can now take that idea. It's the Old West with steampunk. I've got Guns of Tarnation, right, which is a micro setting that I've put on my blog, owenkcstevens.com. Support me on Patreon. I've got Guns of Tarnation, which is my take on the Old West with a little steampunk and some monsters. Is that inspired by Deadlands? Sure. And also Valley of the Guanji and
County.
What?
Briscoe County.
And Briscoe County Jr. and the Legend television series that was out for a while, and Wild Wild West, and there's a lot of stuff, and I get to draw from all of. And my wife's 1990s D&D game that was based on Xanth, where our characters accidentally went through a mine and ended up in the Old West, and we discovered our D&D characters worked perfectly in the Old West. Who's that? Oh, that's our ranger. Oh, works for Texas, huh? What? Sure, I guess. What about him? Well, that's the prince. Oh, some European guy. What? Not. Okay, fine. Works perfectly.
Yeah, that's very subtle. I like that. It's pretty impressive. Okay, you know we've been on for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you have to go? Because I know people want to, of course, some.
So let's cap it in no more than another 30 minutes. But if you've got questions, by all means, if they've listened to me ramble and watched me eat cheese up till now, I can answer some questions.
Well, I mean, somebody's already sold on something, writing for you. So I mean,
it's Juice One. Yeah, he's got my contact information. He can ping me and we can talk.
I mean, I'm telling you, it's once again, it's funny because we both know a lot of people in this industry. Like this stuff we're just talking about is probably stuff we talk about on the phone.
Yeah, totally.
And it's just people. I'm sure people are like, "Oh my God, I never thought about that." And it's like, this is what we do. Sadly enough, and I admit for myself, I don't think I talk to enough people in the industry. I think the closest thing I do is when I do my show.
So the whole reason that Steve Russell and I originally started the Demiplane of Gaming, which had a very similar format to this, right? We had you on the Demiplane of Gaming. You co-hosted once. Was that he and I both were bitching on Facebook to each other one day that we have no water cooler. Right? If you work in an office, you can hang out at the water cooler, and if there's stuff that is even just vaguely related to your industry, you can talk about it and have some ideas. We had no water cooler. And he was like, well, why don't we just chat, right? With the technologies there, we can do Hangouts, we can chat. So we did chat. And after we'd done that for a while, Steve, and this was all Steve was like, when we're talking about all this stuff, and I tell other people we're talking about all this stuff, they're always like, did you all take notes? I want to know that. I want to hear that. So the whole start of that show was just, we're going to talk to each other anyway. Let's record it and invite other interesting people on. One of the things, and that really, really, really drove home for me how much when I worked at Wizards of the Coast in the office, I grew faster as a creative than like the 10 next years where I was working out of my garage or the back room. And I could talk to people online, but I was not in that environment. I've had a lot of people when like Paizo will put up a job and they say, you must be able to relocate. But a lot of people are like, no, in this day and age, it should be exactly the same if I'm writing from home. Folks, I have literally, for both Wizards of the Coast and Paizo, I have worked for them from home. I have worked for them in the office. It is not the same. The company gets more and the employee grows faster if you are in that environment. So, I mean, I would most likely they will have to pry my Paizo job from my cold, dead hands, right? Because there just aren't that many game offices. There aren't that many places where I can turn around and someone as smart as Amanda Hammond-Coons is right there and I can go, is this awesome or is this stupid? Right? And I can get that immediate feedback. I mean, I could ping people on Facebook. I did a lot of chatting by Facebook, but it's not the same. And I also don't hear it, at Paizo, I can hear a conversation in the background, right? What gender is a doppelganger and does it matter? And that conversation.
Wow.
And that conversation is not something I'd ever think of. But having heard that conversation, I am a smarter person for having not even participated. Just having heard them go around that question and bring up the various implications they brought up, the social implications and the magical implications and the implications for what it means for society. So I very much value that. And you were going to take questions from the group, and I went off on another way.
Some of these I can't because it's okay. So let me just tell this to everybody. If you're asking any specific Starfinder questions, Owen cannot answer anything.
Feel free to ask anything you want, right? Ask anything you want, and I will give a answer. That answer just may not cover details.
Well, here's one I know. Starship Combat. Will it be in the core book? Yes, we know that.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Will single pilot fighters work the same way as capital ships?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the same way, right? In the in the regard that a dagger works the same way as a Vorpal sword, and that the same core system is determining the various issues, my expectation is that it would work the same way. A capital ship has concerns about the size of the crew and how many actions it can take and how many guns does it have and how big a volume of space it'll control, which are different from the concerns of something that is a Millennium Falcon or Serenity-sized ship, which are different from the concerns of a single fighter. We are aware of those differences. Our intent is to have a system that will happily embrace them and bring them together. But I can't tell you exactly what we're doing or how in those regards, A, because I'm not authorized to say that kind of stuff yet, and B, because until we're done playtesting, I won't know, did it work and is it what we're sticking with?
Here's something that happened earlier, and I forgot to mention this. This is kind of interesting. Since I noticed the shelf behind you, Owen, I'm now wondering if that shelf is level because there is the screen and the edge are not parallel, which I just noticed on looking at it, like, yes.
So if you look very, very closely right here, that little yellow stripe is literally a level. That is a level sitting on the shelf so that we know for a fact the shelf is level. However, what I am currently looking into is a loose webcam that has a clip that is clipped onto the monitor behind my laptop because my laptop is too thin for the clip for the webcam. So I do not guarantee that the piece of plastic my table is on, or the monitor for my dead machine that I don't even use before, or the plastic clip-on webcam behind it, or me personally are level. But the shelf is level.
I have a feeling this was a long discussion with you and LJ about it being level.
No, it was a very short enough to know. The shelf is going to be level. Here's a level. Fix it.
See, that's a married answer.
She wants her shelves level. I consider that to be a pretty small ask, right? If we're going to put some shelves up, can they please be level?
Here's another one. Will nanotech be in Starfinder?
Will what?
Nanotech. Don't answer that question. Don't answer that question.
Having given it a lot of thought, I'm going to take a hard pass. Nanotech will be in Pathfinder if you want it to be in Pathfinder.
There you go. You know, it's a third party's for. That's that's a third party. I think that'd be kind of cool. See,
the first thing you have to do is define what do you mean by nanotech, right? We have a gray ooze already in Pathfinder, which is the gray goo, which is just nanomachines that are breaking down everything to make more gray goo. Since we're talking about our monsters being backwards compatible, we have a nanotech monster. Our monsters are backwards compatible. If A plus B equals C, then yes, there will automatically be some amount of nanotech. Other levels of nanotech are things like we use nanotech spiders to weave nano webbing that allows your armor to be lighter. I don't know that we're going to bother to tell you exactly how this got later. We might, but that level of nanotech would be in there. Are we going to have a whole bunch of assembler machines at the molecular level that can do anything, anywhere, all the time at no cost? I'm guessing not, just because that makes it hard to be a gameable system.
Okay, those are good answers. Those are totally good answers.
That said, if you're sitting in my game, you may wake up one morning and discover that magic never really existed. It's just that someone's spell park nanomachines got out of the park, and so every time someone does something, they rewrite the universe to make a fireball, and it was never magic to begin with. That won't be official, but I totally might do that in a game.
See,
spell limited because the nanomachines can only. Why does this cost 10,000 gold? Because if you don't have 10,000 gold, the nanomachine's programming is to not give you the information.
Okay, that's feasible. See, this is the problem once again. So you put guys who design stuff for a living in a room together, and then you just start thinking of like, what about this?
Well, right now, of course, anytime I'm talking about how a game world is set up, I immediately start thinking about Westworld, because Westworld, at its core, is a company that's trying to run a LARP. I've read LARPs, so I find it fascinating how they're tackling some of those questions.
I still I'm behind on it slightly. I saw the first two, possibly three.
That's exactly where I am. I saw the first two.
Yeah, I like it, but it's got some things going on.
Oh, totally.
I'm like, okay, I'm interested enough to keep watching.
I think Westworld is doing three really smart things. One, Westworld. A lot of people have gotten up in arms that this incredibly expensive amusement park is a Western, when Westerns aren't the most popular thing in the world. But Westerns aren't the most popular thing in the world right here, right now. I think that means, A, it is perfectly reasonable to say that whenever we have these androids, Westerns have made a huge comeback as people long for a simpler time, but still wish to push forward the idea of innovation and technology in the Industrial Revolution, right? So, but by doing that, it means that science fiction fans aren't trying to watch two stories. We're not trying to watch the science fiction story of their science fiction world and then what's going on in Westworld. We all know the Western tropes, so we get what's going on in that story, but we get to focus on the story behind the story. Two, they're doing fascinating world building, but they're doing it quietly and they're doing it without being too blatant about it, which means you can get really interested in the details of the world, even if they're not particularly connected to three. They clearly have some place where they're going with this, which has a much bigger buy-in to me. I have, for the X-Files and for Lost and for Fringe, for all those shows, there was a moment where I thought to myself, they have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what they're going. Same for the Battlestar Galactica reboot. There came a moment where I thought that. With Fringe, I was wrong. And with Fringe, I thought that, gave it a few more episodes, and kept watching because they started to loop things together. For X-Files and Battlestar Galactica and Lost, I gave it a few more episodes and gave up. And I feel very vindicated that, at least from my point of view, they did not know what they're doing in the ability to give a satisfying solution to the questions asked for me. Westworld, I feel, knows exactly what questions it's asked and has a real good idea how it's going to answer them, and that has me bought in for the ride.
See, that's funny. I'm very much in the same kind of mindset like that, but I don't. I mean, for my mindset has always been, if I'm watching it and I'm bored, it's over. I'll be moving on quickly. Sure. I'm not giving it a chance. And I always say, like, Babylon 5 never did that to me. And Babylon 5 is my epitome of how you write a long series well. And I guess it helps if one guy's writing it,
But it's not that long. It's what, 5 seasons?
Yeah, but like
Doctor Who, when you talk about a long series, 5 seasons ain't doing it for me.
Well, I mean, say for me, I like it because one man
Supernatural is twice as long as Babylon 5.
Look, Babylon 5 had the one thing that I thought was brilliant, and I still think that anybody smart should do it anytime they write. Every character has a trap door, so if you have to write them off the show, it makes sense, and you can get them off the show very easily. Because they had that problem. I mean, people fired, leaving. I thought that was a brilliant idea. It's like, you know what?
I think that makes sense for that kind of ensemble cast show, but since I just mentioned Supernatural, if one of the two main actors left, Supernatural should stop.
Let's just call it like it is. Supernatural should have stopped after season 5.
Well, so I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you because it's still producing some good television.
No, look.
Yes, it is. Totally is. It may not be as good as it was, but I still prefer it to Grimm or to Once Upon a Time or to Sleepy Hollow.
This is the problem I have with that show, and they've tackled it before, and I think I agree with them. Those kids would be dead if they were gamers.
Those kids have been dead. They've been dead a bunch.
But they're gone.
Not only have they been dead a bunch, but in the most recent season, they had a Reaver sit down with them and say, "Boys, I just want you to know, there's been a change of rules. Next time you're dead, that's it. There will be no resurrections. There will be no exceptions. There will be no escaping from." So the show was aware that it had made them too invulnerable because it had brought them both back too often and hit a reset.
It should never get to that point. Come on.
So here's the thing with Supernatural. Supernatural is a show about two boys on Route 666, right? It's two guys in a car driving around facing vampires. The reason that it peaked around season 4 or season 5 is that the creators didn't think they'd get 10 seasons, no matter what they did. It was only after season 5 that they said, "Whoops, we've been renewed."
But that was they should have bit the bullet and said, "Nope, that's it. We're done. We're out." Because that show...
It's easy for you to say that because you're used to being the guy, right? But that means you have to look your second unit director in the eye and say, "I could have a job for you for a year, but instead you're unemployed." Hey, catering, we could employ you all for a year. I know that we've been doing this for 5 years together, and Martha, you just had a baby. But all of you, the 150 people supported by the show, are now all unemployed, even though we have the money to pay you.
The heartstrings. You went for the heartstrings. That's your tactic. The heartstrings.
Absolutely.
Well,
right.
Then let me retort. The best sci-fi show I've seen in probably the last 6 years, Continuum. Without a doubt, they had an idea. At least the first season, I think they had a really good idea what they were doing, and then they added on and dealt with the issue of time travel. I think in a way that I haven't seen done before, and it was brilliant. I've talked about the show as much as I can. If you don't know it, check it out. Continuum. I think it's still on Netflix. It might probably be on Hulu. It is a brilliant show. It's just everything's right with it. And the ending, the last season, they had to clean up a lot of mess. They had a lot of mess to clean up, and they did it in 6 episodes. And they did it well in 6 episodes. But that's how you should have your when you know their end's coming, clean up your end. Or pull an angel at least. Okay, we're gonna be
when you know the end is coming, sure, but if you think the end is coming and then you've gotten renewed, I think it is very reasonable to say we would rather make a less perfect show and keep all these people we like employed than to stop and not make any show at all. And it's different, right? If you are doing something like with Babylon 5. With Babylon 5, the plan was always, we're going to do this many seasons, and then the story's over. I knew that before the first episode was aired. As a result, I presume the second unit director knew that, and that was part of the deal when he came in. But these are people's jobs, and it's not just the one director, the 4 writers, and the 2 main actors, right? There are a bunch of people supported by this. And especially, and if you're complaining that Supernatural was ever high art, and Supernatural has been ruined. The perfect, beautiful, the things that we were going to engrave in golden plates and send out into space has now been spoiled by not ending it at season 5.
Wow.
Supernatural was always a hack show. It embraced being a hack show, and then it got hackier than you like. Sure, I agree with you, but screw it. It's a hack show.
Look.
It's pulp. Pulp was always is the equivalent of being printed on yellow pages with no big words, and we still love it. So why shouldn't we pay people to do catering for it?
Look, well, you really hit me with a lot of logic and a lot of just pure. Oh, he's right.
If somebody comes along and says, I want to make Hamlet 2, except for the fact that Hamlet 2 is a hysterical movie. But beyond that, if someone comes along and says, I want to turn Hamlet into a series, and we are going to piss all over Hamlet, there's a legitimate artistic integrity question there. I don't think that applies at all to Supernatural. They did some great stuff, but I think that stuff was transcending their genre, and I want to applaud them for when they transcended it instead of denigrate them for when they just did as well as you would expect when you're told there's a show on the CW about 2 hot brothers that totally are being shipped.
Look, I understand the 2 brothers. I get that idea, and I like. I gotta tell you, I like the concept of 2 brothers because they act like brothers. I don't know. At least the first 5 years, I felt I was watching my brother and myself on TV, and I'm like, "That's great." They got that down locked perfectly. Excellent. You know, season 4, another solid season. Season 5, another solid season. And I was like, "Wow, man, you guys took a real gamble." And you said, you know, you could tell it was written for 5 seasons. You know, as a creative person, I don't know if you do this, but I write from the end and then to the beginning. Because, you know, I don't want to write myself into a corner. I'm terrified of that. That's like one of my greatest fears. You know, I know it's going to happen in the end. I kind of know it's going to happen in the beginning, but I can figure out cool ways to get to the beginning from the end.
I have done so much more setting work and mechanics work than story work over the course of my career that I can't say I have a way that I do stories at the moment. Certainly, when I have outlined stories in the past, I always want to make sure it's a solid ending because to me, just not only I don't want to be in a corner, but for me, if a movie is a great movie with a terrible ending, I walk out of the movie theater going, wow, that really sucked at the end. Whereas if it is a, at best, mediocre movie and I love the ending, then I'm walking out doing this because I liked the ending. The ending was good. And they're like, well, wasn't the middle kind of crappy? Yeah, you know, it was kind of. But I really liked the ending, so I don't care. I am actually going to leap back and answer some people's questions since you're not asking them to me, just so that I can feel like I answered some questions. Let's see. We've got what one project that you've worked on are you most proud of? That is an awesome question. I read it to myself, so this is only my fault. I'm not 100% sure what one project I've worked on am I the most proud of. And it's going to change based on when you catch me and what I have looked at recently. For a long time, it was The Guide to Absalom. That was one of my first standalone books. Before that, it was Starships of the Galaxy, which was a standalone book. And there's a moment where people are contacting you to say, hey, I'll give you $300 for that out-of-print book you wrote. And that moment feels pretty good. Right now, actually, I think it's probably Freeport City of Adventure, which is a book I was the developer for Green Ronin. It's a huge book. You can stop a bullet with this book.
Or kill a friend.
It is 543 pages, most of which are describing a single city, and it's got a map, and it has some pictures of what the rest of the world looks like. And this is absolutely not a solo book, right? The majority of the writing of this book was other people, but they were smart people, and this is a kind of awesome book. And if you need the big pirate city or the big urban setting for Pathfinder, I strongly encourage you to pick this up. Personally, in my opinion, if you just want to see a large city done well for any game, I would recommend you pick that up. So right at the moment, I'm going to say that is my biggest book. We've got Jacob. Will Owen please pay my recent art bill? Jacob, we're behind on paying you the art bill. I apologize. LJ's home tomorrow, and I am sure she will pay you. I'm sorry if we left you hanging for a few days. And I will totally take credit as it being my fault. We'll get you soon. Will there be power armor in Starfinder? Yes.
Come on, of course.
A lot of people don't know this, but the idea of battle armor in science fiction dates back to E. Doc Smith's Lensman series, I believe specifically Galactic Patrol. There is not a bigger fan of the Lensman series in the world than me. There are very few bigger fans of power armor, be that all the way up to Gundam, Iron Man, Exo Man of War, Spitfire from the new universe. If it's a suit of powered armor, I'm a fan.
You call Spitfire. I'm impressed by that alone.
I had an entire run of Spitfire, and I liked it better before they tried to turn it into a spy comic. But so yes, I'm not saying you'll be able to run around with it in first level. And if you do, it's going to be first level powered armor. I don't even know if we'll have first level powered armor, but is it in the game? Yes, it is in the game. Absolutely. What else we got here?
Iron Man's great armor.
Someone said Tolis for a big coastal city as well. Tolis is more than twice the size of Freeport. So I positively, absolutely agree that it's a great book. But I will also promise you that you can get a copy of Freeport cheaper than you can get a hard print copy of Tolis at this point. Someone said vote for Trump. No. Let's see. Lewis, when are you coming to PaizoCon again? Hey, Lewis, when are you coming to PaizoCon again? Because I've never gotten to see. Have we ever met in person even once? Ever?
No.
When are you coming up to PaizoCon again?
Okay. All right. As everybody knows, I got Lucas.
Yeah, totally. No, I understand. I'm not saying it'd be easy. I get that it's a thing.
No, it's like more. It's more about for him because Lucas is 6. What is exciting to Lucas? Bounce houses and bounce houses. If PaizoCon had a bounce house, I could stuff him in the bounce house and walk away for 6 hours and come back. Lucas would still be in the bounce house. That's why I love my son.
You could come out. You could stay with us in our bare bedroom right behind me, and my wife will keep Lucas amused.
I've got to do something because it's like I've got to get to Seattle. Just from look, I live in South Florida. I want to see different weather conditions. I love sunshine, but even I'm like, geez, man, how about a little bit of cooler day? How about some leaves are falling? Or it's hard living in paradise. And my theory is that theoretically, I'm going to go to Gen Con next year. I don't know how I'm going to pull it off. I don't have a clue, but I'm going to go to Gen Con because I haven't been in over a decade. I need to go. Everybody says the same thing. Lewis, you need to go because you need to talk to people. And this is kind of the introvert of me. I live down south. I live as far south as you can get, except being in Cuba, in the U.S. And it's like, while there's a vibrant gaming community in Florida, it's not like when I lived in Connecticut or Indianapolis. Winter is helpful for gaming.
Yeah.
I live somewhere where it's sunny all the time. My version of winter is it's literally 65 to 70 degrees outside, and we're wearing sweaters.
Yep.
I want you to put that in perspective. So, I want to go. I should go. I need to go. And I enjoyed PaizoCon. And I enjoyed Seattle as a city. I was like really surprised how much I liked Seattle. So
I'm not at all surprised that you like Seattle.
I mean,
Seattle's a good town.
But I'm an East Coast boy, 100%. I mean, born in Chicago, but grew up on the East Coast. I love the East Coast. I am 100% East Coast in my blood.
I would actually be more concerned you being from having spent a lot of time in the South that you would be moan or lack of barbecue. But I can hook you up with some homemade barbecue out here that will have you covered. So
well, Stan was nice to take me to a place that he goes to normally. The barbecue is quite good.
I am not a fan of Cedar River barbecue. I go there sometimes, but I'm not a fan of their barbecue.
Really?
Really? Yeah.
See, I like barbecue. I've only had bad barbecue, and I had it when I was in Memphis, which is weird to think about like that.
I have had bad barbecue several times, but it was all here in Seattle. Luckily, I've got a hookup now. So,
see, there's a difference. These are important things.
That's important. Let's see. Someone said, "Oh, cool, man." I always thought it was Starship Troopers in the 1950s. So, Galactic Patrol predates Starship Troopers by, I think, about 15 years. Now, you'll notice I carefully said that the concept of battle armor was introduced in Galactic Patrol. There is some debate as to whether that armor counts as powered armor. And the armor in Starship Troopers is clearly powered armor. I personally think it does qualify as powered armor because everything else in the series is powered. You don't necessarily have to say there's a diesel engine in your truck for that to be a powered truck. But that is one of the reasons why that sometimes people will say that Starship Troopers is the origin of powered armor. And it certainly popularized it more than Lensman did. But Lensman does have armor in science fiction as battle armor prior to that. Let's see. Lensman was 1930s and 40s. Yeah. I'm guessing you'll be limiting tech in Starfinder by price. I certainly understand why you would guess that. That sounds really likely. It's not something I'm going to be speaking to specifically, though. There's the D20 games are good at having a fight and getting stuff. We certainly want to maximize what this game is good at. I will leave those two sentences by themselves for the moment.
Well, then here's a little counter to that. Destiny, which I think is the best fantasy, best sci-fi reskinning of a fantasy game. Is that kind of the feel that you guys are kind of going for?
So the feel we are going for is the feel we're going for, right? I hesitate to try and define it through any other specific, right? Like, I mean, I'm in this weird place where I am a huge fan of everything about Warhammer 40K except the universe. I love the Space Marines and the Imperial Guard and the Chaos Gods and Psychers and the Ecclesiarchy and Eldar and Tau. I'm a fan of all of those elements. And when you pile them all and you put the only war grimdark frosting across the top, you suddenly lose me as a place I want to spend time. But I love everything in it. Everything in it I love. So certainly that is one of the things that's, when I was at PaizoCon and I was telling people when we were first announcing this, that Knights of Iomedae in powered armor with holy plasma cannons and holy chainswords is part of my vision of what this will be like. But the idea is there to try and take the pieces that I like from these other materials and put them together in a way that you can put together whatever pieces you like. We also are working within the huge benefit and huge constraint that this is a possible future of the existing Pathfinder universe, right? So we need to deal with the fact that at least when the Galarian timeline was running, there were 4 elemental planes. Now, could we say that all 4 elemental planes collapsed into the one plane of Grimdark? Sure, we totally could do that. I'm not saying whether we did or not. But our starting place is, this is a universe that we have already defined with one set of rules. Some things will be different because we're defining it with a different set of rules, right? Greyhawk was Greyhawk in 2nd edition and 3rd edition, but how details worked would sometimes change. But that means that I don't want to say we are going for this feel, because fans of that thing are going to be thinking of something in that feel that is not what I'm thinking of. We want a high-adventure science fantasy system that focuses on 4 to 6 players having a good time.
Okay, now I'm going to cut you off because it literally is 3 minutes now.
It is 3 minutes now.
So okay. Last question.
All right.
It's going to be useful for other people, definitely not for me. What would you tell freelancers? What would you tell them to help them be better? Like, what's like the 2 important rules for freelancing?
All right.
Besides the rules we always hear, but like, what are the 2 Owen rules?
I'm going to tell you 2 rules, and one is going to be from each side of the coin. As a developer and publisher, my number 1 rule is hit your deadline. The corollaries to that is everything that could impact that one thing. You need to fix or talk to your editor or developer about as soon as you know it, right? I have had people come to me and said, and don't be worried about us never working with you again if something reasonable has happened, right? I was supposed to write one of the Second Darkness AP adventures for Paizo back in the day before the Pathfinder role-playing game. And I was working at a job that involved call centers in places that got hit by hurricanes. And I was told, hey, you're going to be pulling some overtime because you're going to be covering for people whose houses have been hit by hurricanes. And then I got kidney stones. So I've got kidney stones and mandatory overtime with the place I'm working because no one will pay me. It was a temporary job. I contacted Paizo and said, I right now have this list of potential problems. I can see this being a problem. And James Jacobs wrote back to me and he said, so if you tell me you can hit, I can give you 1 more week. And if you tell me that you can turn everything over and it will be high quality at the end of that week, then we're good, go forward. If you think there's any chance you're going to miss that, tell me now. You get a get out of jail free card. No one will be mad at you. We will take the outline you've already turned over and we will hand it to someone else to finish, who can finish it by the deadline, because that's all the time we have. And I said, tell me tomorrow. And I talked to my wife and I thought about it and I laid around in pain because I had kidney stones, and I wrote back and I said, there's a chance I would not have it done within a week. So I am going to miss this opportunity to write for this AP for you guys who I love because I might screw you on it. James Jacobs did not really have a firm opinion of who I was as a freelancer before that. But after that, he has told me multiple times that the fact that I had the professionalism to say, I may cause you a problem, put me much closer to the top of the list on people to contact for things. So that has always done me in very good stead. Sometimes the answer will be, oh, we gave you a deadline, but it turns out we're not going to get to it for 3 months after that. So yeah, go ahead, take all the time you want. The earlier you tell us, the better the odds are we can shuffle things around, right? When I am developing a player companion, that's a 32-page book. If you tell me 2 weeks before the deadline, I'm going to need an extra week, I can look at what everyone has told me, and if I can do your stuff at the end of the development process, no problem. But if everyone else turning over things has already told me they're going to be late, then I don't have any way to help you be late. And if you tell me now, they tell me later, then they're the people that I may have to take the work away from and give to someone else. So I know I'm hammering on this. Companies can go under because freelancers miss their deadlines. Products you love playing but have one thing you hate, sometimes have that thing you hate because freelancers miss their deadlines. So from that side, hit your deadlines. Switching hats, as a freelancer, my advice is write. If you do not currently have anyone offering you work, and you have gone out and contacted people and they still don't have work for you, make up a project in your head and write it. When you are done, by all means, try to either self-publish that thing or sell it to someone. There's no reason not to try that. And if that doesn't work, put it in a drawer, or more likely a Dropbox, and write the next thing. If you want to write the stuff and you put it on your blog for free so people can see what you can do, great. There are people that when they've contacted me for work and I said, what have you done? They said, well, here's some stuff I put on my blog. And at least at that point, I have some idea what they can do. I put stuff up for free on my blog, owenkcstevens.com. I have a Patreon. You can support me. But you get better at writing by writing. So if you want to be a game designer, you design games. If you want to be a board game designer, you design board games. If you want to be a novelist, you write novels. I've had a lot of people tell me, I want to get into the game industries because once I've got my foot in the door as a game designer, then I can write novels. No one who publishes novels cares if you can design a game. No one who designs games cares if you can write a novel. Pick what you want to do and do it until someone can pay you to do it. If that person ends up being you, great. There's a lot of self-publishing options nowadays. If you end up having something finished and you need to find an editor who's looking for work and say, hey, I'll split the profits with you if you'll edit the thing I wrote, because I can't get work either, right? But writers write, designers design, developers develop. Find a way to do it and do it. Those are my two core pieces of advice for being. I know it's rough, right? I know there are people that I ran a podcast and I got paid and it was popular and now that has ended and I don't have that as an option and no one seems to want to give me any work. That happens. This is a rough effing gig. There's no doubt about it. If no one will do that for you, take what technology you can scrabble together, even if that's just, if it's only a recording of your voice, do a recording of your voice. It's only you typing out your notes on a blog, type out your notes on a blog. Whatever it is you want to do it until someone will pay you to do it.
All right, that's it, everybody. We bothered.
Don't let anyone else make money on it without you making money on it, though. I don't have a problem with writing for exposure. Sometimes that's the thing to do. But if they make money, you need to make money. Nothing
wrong with that. That's fair. That's fair and reasonable. All right. So thank you, Owen. Of course, this has been 2 hours. This was always supposed to be, as usual, like a 60-minute thing, and then a 90-minute thing, and now it's 2 hours. So there you go. You get designers together in a room. This is what happens. This is what happens.
This would have been longer, folks. We hadn't talked for half an hour last night.
Oh, good Lord. Once again, we have fun. We get to talk about stuff we like. Like, how dare you think Supernatural should have gone past more than 5 seasons? I'm still upset about that. Good Lord, the devil itself.
I still think they're going to do a spinoff.
Okay, let's not get into that right now.
They tried to do a spinoff. It just wasn't popular enough episode.
See, why are you tempting me to talk about that show?
Here's what I want as a spinoff, right? I want the Jewish rabbi who's got the golem, right? I want him. And I want the cop that has a familiar. I want him. And then I want the Scooby Gang of vampire hunters and some of the non-evil werewolves. I want those characters to get together and become the new Men of Letters. And then once a season, the Winchesters can come in and say, what the hell have you done? But we know the Men of Letters exist. The other spinoff we could do is 1940s Men of Letters. Right? World War II Supernatural Men of Letters.
Okay. The problem with that is the cost on that's going to be, if it's World War II, it's going to be expensive.
It's so sad that we're up over time, Lewis.
You know what? See, this is just your fault. This is your damn fault. All right. So everyone, thank you so much for watching our lovely episode. This is why I only do it once a month, because you can easily spiral into longer conversations.
Yeah,
but
totally.
I want to thank Owen for coming out and speak with us. I want to thank everybody for coming by watching. This video will be up. Well, now since it's all live, this technology thing's amazing. So you can watch it over and over. You can ask questions. It's going to be, of course, a feed, and of course, there's links everywhere for it already. But I'm sure we're putting it everywhere else too. Once again, thanks to Owen for coming out and speaking with us. I'm sure we're going to have Owen on again when Starfinder comes out, so everybody can ask every question. Like, this thing doesn't work the way I thought it would. Is this thing's broken? Let the man finish the project first, and then we can start griping about what
I can answer most of those questions already. If it's broken, you're not playing it right.
Oh, don't kid yourself. I can't wait to see some of the stuff that goes on. I cannot wait. Because, science fiction, it's different. Science fiction is different. And,
Well, yeah, but I mean, I've got Gamma World and 3 editions of Star Wars under my belt, if nothing else. I've certainly done science fiction. I have some science fiction D20 cred.
So you got a little bit, just a little bit, a tad, if you'd say. But
I invented Hut battle armor, goddammit.
I'm just saying, I can't imagine what some people will do, because, like I said, it's going to be awesome. But once again, we're not talking about this anymore. We're getting off the air. As always, everybody, come by Monday through Thursday for our show. Next month, we'll have some guests. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but we'll tell you later when we get the guests signed up, because that's how I do things. As always, I do appreciate. Thank you for everyone stopping by. Thank you for your questions. Make sure and send us any more questions. I'm sure Owen will be answering them at his blog and at his Patreon. Maybe you haven't heard, Owen's got a Patreon project.
I do have a Patreon. I do. You can support me for as little as $3 a month.
That's a good deal. That's a good deal. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, and you all have a good night, and I'll talk to you all later.